Shortly, I'll be talking about the momentum and the trending signals. Again, my signals remain bullish. I believe we're going higher. Major resistance directly overhead. We'll be watching it. Talking more about these signals shortly. Just quickly, I want to continue to point out momentum is still negative for the S&P. NASDAQ went slightly positive to start the week up, but again, we're above the 50-period moving average on the S&P, and momentum is still negative. That's not supposed to be that way. The 50, you're supposed to be in positive territory. So again, it's likely we're going to go in positive territory, but in all likelihood to form a divergence. It's probably going to be go up and hit resistance, and we start completing this divergence right here. Again, a divergence where price goes higher, but the indicator makes a lower high. The NASDAQ, we're now moving into positive territory, but again, you've got a divergence forming here in the daily time frame. That is very problematic. You're above the 50, but you're forming negative divergence. Smaller divergence at the July peak right here. We had a divergence at the March high right here that formed. Now it's evolving into a larger divergence. This one will likely produce a reversal. NASDAQ daily chart. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. Like the chart, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel. Take a moment to do that. I would really appreciate it. Follow the link below to take you to a secured site. You could donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. But if you could take a moment to do that, let me know you want this information supporting the channel today. It would really be encouraging to hear from you. Thank you for your consideration for that. Take a look at the VIX. VIX was up today, but it got another black candlestick. We continue to get these black candlesticks with lower highs. We did gap higher. Again, I'll be watching to see what happens. Does this low hold? Do we come back and take it out? Does a divergence form or confirmation of a higher low? Do we roll over on the MACD or not? S&P 500 is also, along with NASDAQ, forming negative divergences on their MACDs. Here we're setting up a higher low so far. And again, oftentimes the VIX will bottom before the S&P tops. Even if we go down further, again, it still may form a higher low down here somewhere. May not yet be done. Possible diversions as well. Sometimes the VIX bottoms before the S&P tops. We'll be looking at these levels. Remember, the signals are still bullish. Turn in that area, we've got to see momentum signals turn, and then the trend signals turn. Got to see a reversal happen if we're going to turn off of the upper channel of the S&P 500 upper boundary. P's gone higher to higher highs. We got a new closing high today. The VIX has not. The VIX has not gone to a new low. Told you again, we are likely going to rebound to fill the gap or get a higher high, hit our 20-week moving average weekly time frame just here above our 50-period moving average, because we turned down off of the 200 and got the black candlestick, and the hanging man candlestick formed with that black candlestick. I talked about that at the time. Looking for a rebound for a lower high, higher high. We got the higher high scenario, have that major resistance directly overhead. Again, the S&P is likely going to reach this trend line. We came to just under it, just slightly under it previously. You can see that a little bit better on the daily chart, but we were just under it. I think we're likely going to tag it or overthrow it. And again, when Bitcoin peaked over here in March with the S&P, it overthrew it and got a topping tail. S&P may do the same thing, but then they both sold off together. Bitcoin is likely going to new highs with the CPI. It's a couple weeks behind the S&P 500, but they both have the channels. They both have these divergences. He's already forming it because it's moving to a new high. Bitcoin's not quite there yet. Expect it's going to make a new high. See what happens at these upper channel lines. Maybe the CPI gives us a rally to tag this level or even overthrow it. Maybe the Fed gives us the reversal off of it. Or again, possibly we rally with both and get a post-Fed sell-off afterwards. But you got a pretty good shot that the divergence is going to produce a reversal here. And you've got the same thing going on. And let me just bring it up here. You got the same thing going on with the awesome oscillator in the weekly time frame. We're starting the week off with the green bar. We'll see what happens. But again, this divergence could be red before the end of the week if we start to sell off, or sell off and have it remain green and start getting a red bar next week if we in fact complete the divergence. So again, I'll be watching, but I think you got a pretty good shot that we're going to complete the divergence very soon here. The same thing going on with the MACD and other indicators in the weekly time frame, but the RSI and the awesome oscillator I'm watching them carefully. And I think we'll end up turning back below the 10-week moving average and the 20-week moving average. And if you do that, again, you've got the possibility of the head and shoulders, which I've talked about. Exact same thing going on with the NASDAQ 100 weekly chart. Again, the same divergences forming on the RSI and on the ASM oscillator, as well as on the MACD. The MACD is turning up, going into positive territory with the histogram, so that divergence is coming to a conclusion in not too distant future. A green ASM oscillator bar here in the weekly time frame. We'll be looking for red ASM oscillator bars either before the weekends or in the next week or two. As I've said, if we get a post-Fed sell-off, a red bar should eventually show up. NASDAQ has major resistance directly overhead as well. We have negative divergences that are forming on the 60-minute charts here on the daily chart. We have it at the moment right here on the ASM oscillator and the MACD. Now, again, it could change. We can go higher and then form the divergence after confirmation of a lower high. But again, we rallied today on NASDAQ. It was up 70, NASDAQ 100 up 74 points, rounding up 0.39%. Again, being helped by NVIDIA. We've got major resistance directly overhead. So this is the daily chart right here. Here's the daily chart on the S&P. Again, we're holding above these 10-period moving averages. Again, possible divergences in play right here, right now on the MACD. Turning back up into positive territory and forming this divergence. And on the RSI in the daily time frame, as I've talked about, here on the MACD and the ASM oscillator. A topping tail, I told you this could just be a pullback or, again, a bigger pullback going higher. Well, we're going sideways. Topping tail was not confirmed. As I talked about, sticks are meaningless unless you get confirmation again. I still believe we're going higher. We did get a new closing high, but I think we're going higher. I think these divergences are going to play out and produce a reversal surrounding the Fed. Maybe, again, that we rally with the CPI and sell off with the Fed and get it this week happening. It's very possible. As I said, a post-Fed sell-off through this week on Thursday and Friday, or maybe on into options expiration next week. There's a high probability we're going to get a reversal here with the Fed, either on the Fed day or shortly thereafter. Sometimes you see the market rally up over here. Again, we rallied with the Fed. We rallied the day after the Fed, but then you got a reversal, and it was a post-Fed sell-off. We went 3 points higher over here. NASDAQ and the Dow peaked the very day after the Fed. This marked the Fed bottom over here, the inverted hammer. There's a high probability that with resistance directly overhead that we're going to see a Fed. Dow is still struggling around the 20-week moving average. Again, we'll see if we can get some traction back up or not. Try to rally with the CPI on Wednesday before the market opens with futures. If that helps the Dow cash. Dow turned off this trend line. It never did make it to this one. It may not. And NASDAQ 100 was up today. Again, I think it's headed to this trend line right here. We were just shy under it. I think you're going to hit it this week in all likelihood. I think that will complete the divergence, or at least you got a pretty good shot that it completes the divergence here in the weekly time frame. And again, as we looking at on the ASM oscillator as well, very similar to the divergence in 2021, the bullish divergence down here in 2022, the negative divergence here, the negative divergence here that led to the 8% sell-off over here, the July peak and sell-off that followed. These divergences produce corrections or reversals. This one's likely going to produce a reversal, and you've got a bearish rising wedge, but I still think you go higher, slam up into this level, but then I think it's followed by a reversal. That may happen after the Fed. It may happen with the Fed, but you can see the resistance as clearly as I can. There's likely going to be sellers lurking at that trend line. Maybe we overthrow it. I said Bitcoin did. It ended up getting a topping tail and closing back below it by the end of the week. We'll see what happens. Watch these divergences on the ASM oscillator and here on the RSI in the weekly time frame. And we had these little divergences form on the 60-minute charts, and that gave us this kind of sell-off there that produced a topping tail on Friday. It may just be we're going sideways. It may be we get a bigger pullback and then go higher. Again, it could be we end up selling off with the CPI and then rallying with the Fed. Play out that way. Regardless, I think we're going up to the trend lines I've been showing you. I did draw a parallel boundary here for this lower boundary right here for the NASDAQ And I think we likely form another reference point of a divergence. If we do hit this upper channel line, again, we could move towards that upper boundary in the weekly time frame, or maybe even overthrow it if we try to come into contact with this trend line. This is just a parallel trend line with this lower boundary. There's no other touch on this one here. If I change it slightly, maybe right there, but not perfect. Again, I expect we get another reference point of a divergence in all likelihood. And again, it may come down and do it like that. It may do it immediately. Right now, we're kind of going sideways. You have a little miniature head and shoulders on these intraday charts. But again, it very well be we hit those upper channel lines, or channel line on the S&P, the upper boundary, the rising wedge on NASDAQ before we see any kind of reversal happen. Got these little miniature head and shoulder patterns on the intraday charts, left shoulder, head formation, possible right shoulder. If we start to sell off, and if we sell off with the CPI data, then maybe we rebound with the Fed. Again, the CPI is supposed to be cool. So again, I think you got a shot that you rally with the CPI, but we'll see. Whichever way it plays out. Again, I still think we go higher, hit those upper boundaries, think we turn, but we may get a bigger pullback. But you do have this possible little miniature head and shoulders here in the 5 and 15 minute time frames. This is the S&P. Again, it may mean nothing. It may be that we're consolidating and we end up breaking higher and invalidate this pattern completely by pushing above the head formation. So do keep that in mind. Again, whichever way it plays out, I still think we're going to new highs. The CPI or the Fed could get us there. It could be followed by a sell-off at major resistance directly overhead. I went through the trend lines. See it, go watch a video. The first video I did over the weekend, I went through all the trend lines, monthly and the weekly time frame. So I'll refer you to that in reference to the resistance that I continue to talk about. It is on the 15-minute chart. And again, if we end up coming back down, you get a little miniature head and shoulders, then the 200 here at the low 5,300 area then comes into play. If we get a bigger sell-off and a bounce, we'll see what happens. Try to start a reversal without hitting the resistance levels I've been talking about. My guess is we're still going to hit them. Remain bullish. Again, I think you got a pretty good shot that we're just kind of going sideways right here and that we're going to now start to go higher. In all likelihood, we continue the sideways move and pull back and then go higher. But be surprised to see a rally with the CPI data coming in cool. And again, I'll be looking for another divergence either immediately or again, something like that. As I've said, whichever way it plays out, it can play out a couple different ways, but I'm looking for another reference point of a divergence here, a larger divergence, multiple point divergence, and maybe it looks something like that we come up in this area here, reach that upper boundary, and maybe even overthrow it on our weekly chart. The MACD is likely going to form a divergence here. We got a little one right here that gave us the sell-off, this little tiny one. I think you're likely going to form a larger divergence here. Say you could rally with the CPI, sell off with the Fed, or rally with both and Fed sell off with the CPI. Then I'll be watching the support levels on the 15-minute chart. I'll be watching the 50 period here on the 60-minute chart. Whichever way it plays out, whether the consolidation is now done sideways or we get a bigger pullback and go higher, whatever, I still think we're going higher. I think sellers are going to be there and pounce on this thing. We got a possible head and shoulders. Now, again, we got a new closing high, but we still have that intraday high from Friday. Again, my guess is we're probably going to exceed it. You had a topping tail. So far, the candlestick's not been confirmed. Sorry about that. I had to cough. And I think you're still likely forming the head formation, but then I think you're going to complete divergences in multiple time frames and down here on the MACD, and then I think you're going to come back down here and this level of horizontal support here in the 4,900 level. Could take us to the next Fed meeting, so keep that in mind, and then you got a shot at this pattern playing out. We rally up into the upper channel line. The Dow could hit the 61.8 Fibonacci into the golden pocket still. We try to rally with the Fed and CPI, one or the other. Again, back to the 60-minute chart. The consolidation might be done. Momentum is trying to turn back up here. Look at that. So again, we've just kind of corrected sideways here a little bit. If we pull back, again, I'll be watching the 50-period moving average. You get the support and resistance line there as well. But I think you can rally and see momentum recycle back up here, even form a divergence later on as we go up towards the resistance levels, or maybe even overthrow them just a bit as I've been talking about. Trend signals remain bullish. I think we're going to go up and hit that upper boundary in the weekly time frame. And if I bring it up, the trend line, the upper boundary, you can see here in the daily time frame that, again, we still haven't reached it. A little bit harder to see there on the weekly chart. Zoom in here on the daily, you can see it very clearly. And again, this trend line is where I think we are headed. Maybe we even overthrow it, but this is where I think we're going here this week in all likelihood. And then again, divergences would complete. You could see a topping tail surrounding this level or even overthrow it and get a topping tail and close right at it. But this is what I'm going to be looking for if we hit this trend line this week. I think we will. There's going to be sellers lurking in this area. Momentum here, positive. Trend still bullish. I think that's going to carry us higher, and we might get a CPI rally here. Now, again, I think that the S&P is still going to come up and hit this upper channel line right here. Signals remain bullish. Everything's green. Momentum here, still bullish. Trend is still bullish. Again, as long as we hold above these levels, the trend is bullish. We got a warning that something was about to happen here. It did push higher. We had that break higher. I talked about that early last week. Again, it was warning just as we had it happen here. And we got the sell-off and right here. And we got the push higher. I still think we go up to this level and maybe even overthrow it. And then again, if we start to turn, these signals will all start turning bearish. Everything will start going red. Guess is that sellers are lurking directly overhead. Well, we got momentum forming a top here. We never got, and now it's flipped back to bullish here. Again, we never got sell signals like we had back over here. And like the bullish signals, we got the opposite of it like we had back over here. We just saw momentum shift. The trend remained bullish. Momentum's back to bullish here. I think we go higher, but then I think we turn. Now, if we go up there, again, we could complete a divergence on a lot of indicators. Right here, we could complete a divergence with momentum. And if it's followed by momentum going negative, say we see it go higher and go negative and reverse in this area or even overthrow it, then again, you could be headed back down here to get your right side of the head formation if we are forming a head and shoulders, which again, shoulders formed at the 2022 top. Head and shoulders are common. A inverse head and shoulders formed at the 2022 bottom. So again, these divergences in the daily time frame are forming, and they may complete at just a little bit higher levels. Now here, again, notice, while momentum turned back to bullish, the bars reflecting momentum have turned back to bullish, showing, again, just a sideways kind of a consolidation. So again, my guess is that we're going to go higher and then turn, that we've been kind of correcting sideways here, and even here in the on the intraday charts, just kind of going sideways the last few sessions after this push higher. Momentum shifts back to bearish. We'll start seeing red bars again. We'll likely be starting a reversal surrounding this trend line just at it or overthrowing it. If I just go to the bars reflecting the trend, again, they started going orange over here and then eventually red. And then here, when we got back above the line representing the trend here, we got back above it. They flipped back to green. Over here at the correction, they turned red and orange, but back to green. They're still green. Again, showing this, reflecting it as a correction. We got the sell here, the buy here. And again, notice all the while, the trend signals remain bullish and the balance of power remained bullish. Still think we go higher. We'll start watching to see if momentum flips back to bearish, and if it does, do the trend signals turn back to bearish? And if it does, then it's likely we're going to get a reversal and possibly a major top. Okay, the Dow was up 69 points, up 0.38%. The S&P was up just over 0.25%, up just under 14 points. NASDAQ was up 0.35%. The Russell was up 0.25%. The VIX was up 4.26%, closed at 12.74. It's going to be a big week. We're going to have the inflation data with the CPI and the PPI inflation data on Wednesday and Thursday before the market opens. And then we're going to have the Fed Wednesday during the session. Again, the CPI is supposed to come in cool side. Year over year is supposed to be lower. Line year over year is supposed to come in right at the same level. We're going to be at 0.1% for month over month headline, 0.3%. percent for core month over month. So it is supposed to be tame. The Fed economic projections, we're going to get the Fed estimate for the Fed funds rate 2024 and 2025. Be a market mover. Again, I believe we're going higher. There's major resistance directly overhead. We can overthrow this level just a bit. Bitcoin did the last time it hit the peak on the channel. He may do the same, but could see a sell-off surrounding the Fed. Now, oftentimes you get a post-Fed sell-off the following days, the following week. Very, very common. We have options expiration coming up the week after the Fed there, next week. And Thursday we'll get the CPI wholesale inflation data. It is expected to leave rates where they are. Again, it's going to be the press conference and the economic projections with the Fed funds estimate, dot plot, where rates are going. That will likely be the market mover. Showed you over the weekend, again, the Fed meetings are calling the turns in the market. The Fed meetings are calling tops, bottoms, or continuations of the trend. We've had this rally, so it's, again, likely going to be a top or a continuation of the trend. The problem with it being a continuation of the trend is you have major resistance directly overhead in the monthly and the weekly time frame, and you're forming negative divergences on the RSI in the weekly time frame, on the awesome oscillator. So there's a high probability this Fed meeting is going to mark a turn. It could be, if it plays out that way, that we get an immediate turn. It could be a delayed reaction with a post-Fed sell-off, as I've said, where we end up going a little bit higher and then turn. I think you're going to rally with the CPI. If it comes in cool and it doesn't have a miss, I think you're going to rally with the CPI. We could turn with the Fed, or we could rally with both and get a post-Fed sell-off, completing the diversions, maybe going into options expiration or just the day or two after the Fed. There's a high probability you're going to get a turn here based on the negative divergences in the weekly time frame that are developing. At the strong jobs report, previously we had 2 cuts penciled in here with Fed fund futures. Now it's again down to 1 here, either in November or December. The September cut has gone away. Yeah, so we'll be watching. This looks like with the Fed meeting, and again, we're going to get how many cuts. The estimate is going to be how many cuts is expecting for 2024 and 2025. Remember, it was way overly optimistic and expecting 7 cuts this year. Totally out of touch with reality. I told you that at the time. Eventually, that went down to none. It's been hovering right now between about 1 and 2. Changes every single day, but we'll continue to monitor this. But right now, at the moment, you have a cut. So then just 1 cut for either November or December. Both of them are less than 50% of chance. Again, this is just the betting markets are thinking here. And we have both the dollar and the 10-year Treasury note yield getting bullish hammers in the weekly time frame. They both have broken out, back tested, and now they're getting bullish hammers in the weekly time frame. Again, I think the market goes higher. I think the dollar is bottoming out here. Broke out of this bullish falling wedge, the bull flag here. Broke the downtrend, we back tested, and now we're getting a little double bottom here. We're getting a hammer in the weekly time frame. If we rally with the CPI, we may see this pull back. We'll see what happens with the Fed. We'll see what happens with the CPI and the PPI. This may get confirmed this week. It may get confirmed next week. But again, in order for it to mean anything, it has to get confirmation and a follow through here for the weekly chart for the dollar. Tapped higher, we're pushing higher. In the daily time frame, we're getting a little bit of a topping tail. You can see that here in the weekly time frame. We'll see what it looks like by the end of the week. But again, we could still pull back and test this low before all is said and done, and then go on our way. Could sell off. Dollar go higher with the CPI, but then end up selling off in the market with the Fed. The dollar rebounds. We'll see what it looks like by the end of the week. Rally with both, and then again get a post-Fed sell-off. If we in fact get a top Fed, and again the Fed meetings have been calling the bottoms and tops and the continuations of the trend. A lot of resistance on the S&P directly overhead. Just keep this in mind. We're starting gapping higher by the week. We'll see what we look like by the end of the week. I still think we're going to likely rally with the CPI data, see what happens with the Fed. Don't sell off with the Fed immediately. Again, keep in mind there could be a delayed reaction, a post-Fed sell-off. Very, very common. The dollar has broken out of this downtrend. It broke out. It back tested. We got a bullish hammer just above this trend line right here. Now a new channel and a possible double bottom in the daily. Hammer can get confirmed this week. It can get confirmed next week. Pull back first, but the breakout of the trend line and the back test is going to be very bad for the stock market. It's going to be very bad for Bitcoin if we start seeing this begin to now move up and start taking out this high, eventually moving up here again, be in an overall topping process on the S&P if we turn off these levels of resistance, which again are directly overhead. 10-year yield got the same candlestick. The